Eleanor Harper, Ellie to her friends, stood in front of her bedroom mirror, smoothing the fabric of her black dress against her hips. At 38, she still had that spark, that quiet confidence that turned heads without trying too hard. The dress hugged her in all the right places, elegant but with an edge, the kind of look that said she wasn't here to play small. Tonight was her 15th wedding anniversary with Victor Marshall, and she'd picked this outfit with intention. Vic, her husband, had been distant lately, his attention drifting somewhere she couldn't quite reach. But tonight, she wanted his eyes back on her. Ellie ran Harper Designs, a boutique interior design firm she'd built from scratch in Los Angeles. Her work decked out the homes of Hollywood's elite. Think sleek penthouses with panoramic views and cozy bungalows hiding behind ivy-covered gates. She had a knack for turning spaces into stories, and over the years her reputation had grown. But to the outside world, she was often just Vic's wife. Victor Marshall, 42, was a big-shot film producer, the kind of guy who could charm a room full of investors with a grin and a well-timed joke. His latest project, some gritty crime thriller, was all he talked about these days. That and how tired he was from late-night meetings. She fastened a pair of silver earrings, her neck still bare, imagining the diamond necklace she'd stumbled across a few weeks ago. It was tucked in a velvet box in Vic's desk drawer. She'd found it while hunting for a misplaced invoice. The stones caught the light like tiny stars, and she'd smiled to herself thinking it was her anniversary gift. Vic wasn't great at hiding things, and she figured he'd surprise her with it tonight. La Belle Étoile, the swanky restaurant he'd booked, was the perfect spot for that kind of reveal. She could already picture him sliding it around her neck, his fingers brushing her skin, maybe even a flicker of the old Vic she'd fallen for all those years ago. But this morning, when she'd gone to peek at it again, just to steal a little thrill before the big night, the box was gone. Her stomach did a tiny flip, but she brushed it off. He'd probably taken it with him, planning to make the moment special. Vic could be theatrical like that. It was part of his Hollywood charm. Still, something nagged at her as she slipped on her heels. Lately, he'd been distracted, phone buzzing at odd hours, excuses about location scouting that didn't quite add up. She'd ignored it, told herself it was the stress of the film. After 15 years, you learn to tune out the noise, right? Ellie glanced at the clock. 7:15 p.m. Vic would be downstairs any minute, probably fiddling with his cufflinks or checking his hair in the hall mirror. She grabbed her clutch, a sleek little number that matched her dress, and took one last look in the mirror. Her dark hair fell in loose waves, framing her face just the way she liked it. At 38, she wasn't the wide-eyed girl who'd married Vic anymore, but she'd traded that for something better. Strength, the kind you earn through years of hustle and quiet victories. "Ellie, you ready?" Vic's voice floated up the stairs, smooth as ever, but with a hint of impatience. She smiled to herself. Always in a rush, that man. "Coming," she called back, her tone light but steady. She squared her shoulders, feeling the weight of the night ahead. La Belle Étoile wasn't just dinner. It was a stage, and she'd dressed for the part. Whatever Vic had planned, she was ready to shine. Or so she thought. As she headed down the stairs, her heels clicking softly against the hardwood, she couldn't shake the feeling that tonight wasn't going to go the way she'd imagined, and in a way, she was right, just not in the way she expected. Ellie settled into the passenger seat of Vic's sleek black Tesla, the leather cool against her skin. He flashed her that signature grin, the one that had landed him deals and dazzled her back in their early days as he pulled out of the driveway. "You look incredible tonight, babe," he said. his voice warm but rehearsed, like he was reading from a script he'd used 100 times. She smiled back, letting his hand rest on hers for a moment, but her mind was already drifting. That compliment used to light her up. Now it felt like a prop in a scene she wasn't sure she wanted to play. The drive to La Belle Étoile was quiet at first, the hum of the car filling the space between them. Vic rambled about his film, something about a tricky scene they'd nailed last week. But Ellie's thoughts were elsewhere. Rewinding to 4 months ago, it started with a bank statement she'd pulled up on her laptop one rainy afternoon. Harper Designs shared a joint account with Vic's production company for tax purposes, and she'd been combing through it for a client payment. That's when she saw it. A $15,000 charge from Tiffany & Co., dated 2 days after her birthday. No note, no explanation, just a glaring number that didn't fit. She'd asked Vic about it over dinner that night, keeping her tone casual. "Hey, what's this Tiffany charge? Did we get something for the house?" He didn't even look up from his steak, just waved it off. "Oh, that. It was a gift for one of the investors. You know, smoothing things over for the film. Linda loves jewelry." Linda was a producer he'd mentioned once or twice, a woman in her 50s with a taste for vintage cars, not diamonds. Ellie nodded, letting it slide, but the seed was planted. Something felt off. The next day she called Linda under the pretense of asking about a necklace for herself. "I saw this gorgeous piece at Tiffany's. Vic said you got something similar. What do you think?" Linda laughed, confused. "Tiffany's? Honey, Vic's never gotten me anything fancier than a bottle of wine. Maybe he mixed me up with someone else." Ellie's stomach sank, but she kept her voice steady, thanked Linda, and hung up. That's when she knew. Vic was lying. She didn't confront him. Not yet. Ellie wasn't the type to storm and screaming. She'd built her career on precision, on seeing the whole picture before making a move. So she'd hired James Carter, a private investigator she'd met through a client. James was a no-nonsense guy, ex-cop turned PI, with a knack for digging up dirt without leaving a trace. "Give me 2 weeks," he'd said, and Ellie handed him a check, her hands steady but her heart racing. 2 weeks later, James slid a folder across her desk at Harper Designs. "You're not gonna like this," he warned, his voice gruff but kind. Inside were photos of Vic and a woman, younger, stunning, with sharp cheekbones and a confident strut. They were at a boutique hotel in Santa Monica, his arm around her waist, her head tilted back, laughing. There were emails, too, pulled from Vic's poorly secured account. Password still Ellie Vic, 2010. "The set. Can't wait to see you tonight, Soph," one read. "You're my lucky charm for this film." Another from her. "That necklace is to die for. You spoil me, Vic." Sophia Lopez, 27, an up-and-coming actress in his latest movie. Ellie's chest tightened, but she kept reading. The kicker was a recording James had nabbed from a bug he'd planted in Vic's car. Legal gray area, sure, but Ellie didn't care. Vic's voice crackled through her office speakers. "Once this film wraps, Soph, I'm changing everything. Ellie won't even see it coming." Sophia giggled, and Ellie felt the air leave the room. Changing everything. What the hell did that mean? She thanked James, sent him another check, and sat alone in her office, staring at the LA skyline as the pieces clicked into place. That was 4 months ago. Since then, she'd been methodical, gathering more bank records, hotel receipts, even a text Vic thought he'd deleted about meeting Sophia at a downtown bar. She'd kept it all locked in a digital folder, password protected, waiting for the right moment. And tonight, their 15th anniversary was it. La Belle Étoile wasn't just a celebration, it was her chessboard, and she'd set the pieces exactly where she wanted them. Ellie had called ahead last week, tweaking the reservation. Vic thought it'd be just the two of them in a private corner, but she'd asked for the main dining room surrounded by a few extra tables. She'd invited their old friends, Mark and Tara, who'd hinted at Vic's wandering eye before, a couple of Harper Designs investors who adored her work, and, discreetly, a Hollywood reporter named Claire Voss posing as a random diner. Vic wouldn't know until it was too late. She wasn't just planning a dinner, she was staging a reckoning. Her digging hadn't stopped with James either. A few days ago, she'd logged into the company's financials late at night, something she rarely bothered with since Vic handled that side. Buried in the records was a transfer. 20% of Harper Designs shares quietly moved to Sofia Lopez's name 2 weeks earlier. No approval, no signature from Ellie, who legally owned 70% of the company she'd founded. Vic must have thought she'd never notice, that she was too busy sketching floor plans to check the books. Big mistake. "Ellie, you okay?" Vic's voice snapped her back to the car. They were pulling up to the restaurant now, the valet already jogging over. She turned to him, her smile soft but sharp. "Never better," she said, stepping out into the night air. Her heels hit the pavement with a satisfying click, and she adjusted her clutch, feeling the weight of the iPad inside. She'd loaded it with everything: photos, emails, the recording, the share transfer docs. Tonight wasn't about tears or shouting matches. It was about control, and Ellie had it in spades. Vic held the door for her as they walked into La Belle Étoile, the golden glow of chandeliers washing over them. He had no idea what was coming, and that was exactly how she wanted it. She spotted Mark and Tara at a nearby table, giving her a subtle nod. Claire Voss was there too, sipping wine and pretending to scroll her phone. Ellie's pulse quickened, but her face stayed calm. She'd spent months building to this, and now it was game time. Ellie slid into her seat at La Belle Étoile, the plush velvet chair cradling her as she took in the scene. The dining room buzzed with quiet elegance, crystal chandeliers casting a warm glow, the clink of wine glasses, the murmur of well-dressed strangers who probably spent more on their outfits than most did on rent. Vic sat across from her, loosening his tie just enough to look effortlessly cool, that Hollywood polish still clinging to him like a second skin. "This place is something else, huh?" he said, flashing that grin she used to melt for. "Only the best for my girl." His words were smooth, but they landed hollow tonight, like a line he'd rehearsed too many times. She smiled back, playing along, her fingers tracing the stem of her water glass. "You outdid yourself," she said, her voice light, but her eyes scanning him. He was animated, almost too much rambling about the film, the actors, the premiere he swore would put them on the map. She nodded at the right moments, but her mind was elsewhere, replaying the plan she'd spent weeks perfecting. The extra tables around them were filling up, Mark and Tara chatting with their wine, the investors laughing over some old story, Claire Voss scribbling in a notebook she'd disguised as a planner. Vic hadn't noticed the setup yet, too busy basking in his own glow. The waiter, a wiry guy named Paul with a crisp white shirt, poured their champagne. "Happy anniversary, Mr. and Mrs. Marshall," he said, giving Ellie a polite nod. She thanked him, clinking her glass with Vic's, the bubbles fizzing against her lips. For a second she let herself remember their first anniversary. Cheap pasta at a hole-in-the-wall Italian joint, Vic sliding a tiny silver ring onto her finger because it was all he could afford back then. They'd laughed about it, dreaming big over a $10 bottle of wine. Now here they were, 15 years later, in a place where the appetizers cost more than that whole night. Funny how time changes things. Vic leaned back, sipping his drink, still going on about his movie. The dailies came in yesterday. Sophia's killing it. She's got this raw energy, you know. Ellie's ears perked up at the name, but she kept her face neutral. Sophia Lopez? She asked, casual as anything. The new girl you cast? Vic nodded, oblivious. Yeah, she's a natural. Gonna be a star. Ellie took another sip, letting the champagne cool the heat building in her chest. She'd seen Sophia's raw energy all right, in those hotel photos, pressed up against her husband like she owned him. She was about to steer the conversation elsewhere when the air shifted. Vic's eyes flicked past her, widening for a split second before he plastered on a smile. Ellie didn't need to turn around to know who'd just walked in. She felt it, like a storm rolling over the horizon. But she turned anyway, slow and deliberate, and there she was, Sophia Lopez, strutting through the dining room like she'd stepped off a red carpet. Her dress was fire, and red, tight and bold, screaming for attention. But it wasn't the dress that made Ellie's breath catch. It was the diamond necklace glinting against Sophia's collarbone. The exact one from Vic's desk, the one Ellie had run her fingers over weeks ago, imagining it was hers. Sophia sauntered right up to their table, her heels clicking like a countdown. Vic. Hey, I just had to swing by and say congrats, she chirped, her voice dripping with sugar. She leaned in, resting a manicured hand on his shoulder, then flicked her eyes to Ellie. Oh, hi, you must be Eleanor. I've heard so much about you. Her smile was all teeth, a predator sizing up prey. Ellie met her gaze, unflinching, and caught the smug little tilt in Sophia's lips, like she expected Ellie to crumble right there. Vic shifted in his seat, his laugh too loud. Soph, what are you doing here? Thought you were prepping for tomorrow's shoot. He glanced at Ellie, his eyes begging her to buy it. She's just dropping off a script update, right? Sophia giggled, twirling a strand of hair. Sure, something like that. But she didn't move, just stood there, letting the necklace catch the light. Ellie's pulse thumped in her ears, but her face stayed calm, almost serene. This was it, the moment she'd been waiting for. That's a stunning necklace, Ellie said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. She leaned forward slightly, resting her chin on her hand as if they were old friends catching up. Tiffany's, right? I saw one just like it in Vic's desk a while back. He's got great taste, doesn't he? The room seemed to hush, heads turning subtly their way. Sophia's smirk faltered, just for a heartbeat, but she recovered fast. Oh, this? Yeah, Vic picked it out, said it suited me. She tossed her hair, daring Ellie to react. Vic coughed, reaching for his glass but knocking it over instead. Champagne splashed across the tablecloth, a little flood he didn't bother to clean up. Ellie, it's not. Sophia, you should go. We're in the middle of something here. His voice was tight, higher than usual, but Ellie didn't let him off the hook. No, stay, she said, waving a hand like it was nothing. It's our anniversary after all, the more the merrier. Sophia hesitated, thrown off by the lack of hysterics, but she pulled up a chair anyway, plopping down like she'd been invited. Ellie leaned back, crossing her legs, her eyes darting between them. Vic was sweating now, tugging at his collar, while Sophia sat there preening, oblivious to the trap closing around her. So, Sophia, Ellie started, her tone conversational, how long have you and Vic been working so closely? He's been raving about you. Sophia beamed, missing the edge in Ellie's words. Oh, a few months now? He's been amazing, really hands-on, you know? Vic choked on his water, but Ellie just nodded, letting the silence stretch. Around them, the room was waking up to the drama. Mark and Tara exchanged a look across their table, Tara's eyebrows shooting up. The investors paused mid-conversation, forks hovering. Claire Voss scribbled faster, her pen a blur. Ellie felt their eyes, their curiosity, and it fueled her. She reached for her clutch, her movements slow and deliberate, like a magician about to pull off the trick of the night. "Funny you mention hands-on," she said, her voice still velvet smooth. "Vic's always been good at juggling things. Work, family, other projects." Sophia tilted her head, confused, but Vic knew. His face drained of color, his hand freezing halfway to his napkin. "Ellie, what are you—" he started, but she cut him off with a smile. "Relax, honey, I'm just making conversation." She unzipped her clutch, pulling out her iPad. The screen dark but loaded with everything she needed. She set it on the table between them, casual as if it were a menu, and tapped her nails against it. "You two look cozy, almost like you've got something to celebrate too." The air thickened, heavy with anticipation. Sophia smirked again, leaning closer to Vic, the necklace gleaming like a taunt. "We're just colleagues, Eleanor. Don't get the wrong idea." Ellie laughed, a soft, genuine sound that made Vic flinch. "Ooh, I've got the right idea," she said, her eyes locking on his. "And trust me, it's about to get a lot clearer." She didn't move to turn on the iPad yet, just let it sit there, a silent threat. Vic's jaw tightened, Sophia's confidence wavered, and the room held its breath. Ellie sipped her champagne, savoring the moment. She'd waited months for this, and now that it was here, she was going to enjoy every damn second. Ellie let the silence hang for a beat, her fingers resting lightly on the iPad. The dining room at La Belle Étoile felt like it was holding its breath. Forks paused mid-air, whispers dying out, every eye flickering toward their table. Vic stared at her, his face a mix of panic and confusion, while Sophia shifted in her chair, that smug little smirk still clinging to her lips. The diamond necklace sparkled under the chandelier light, a glaring symbol of everything Ellie had pieced together over the past 4 months. She took a slow sip of her champagne, letting the bubbles fizz against her tongue, then set the glass down with a soft clink. "Vic," she said, her voice steady as steel, "you've always been big on surprises. That's why I love anniversaries with you. Never know what's coming." He forced a laugh, but it came out strangled, his hand twitching toward his spilled glass. Sophia tilted her head, still playing the innocent card. "He's full of surprises," she chimed in, batting her lashes at him. Ellie smiled, tight and sharp, and tapped the iPad awake. The screen glowed to life, and she slid it closer to the center of the table, her movements deliberate, almost casual. "Since we're all here," she said, "I thought I'd share a little surprise of my own." She tapped the screen, and Vic's voice crackled out of the speakers. Tinny, but unmistakable. "Once this film wraps, Soph, I'm changing everything. Ellie won't even see it coming." Sophia's giggle followed, bright and careless, like she'd won something. The real Sophia froze, her hand flying to the necklace as the color drained from her face. Vic lurched forward, reaching for the iPad. "Ellie, what the hell?" But she pulled it back, out of his grasp, her eyes locked on his. "Sit down, Vic," she said, calm as ever. "We're just getting started." He sank back into his chair, his breath coming fast, while the room buzzed with stifled gasps and murmurs. Ellie swiped the screen, pulling up a photo. Vic and Sophia at that Santa Monica hotel, his arms slung around her, both of them grinning like they owned the world. "Cute, right?" she said, turning the iPad so Sophia could see. You two look so happy. When was this? 3 months ago? Right after you told me you were scouting locations in Malibu? Sophia opened her mouth, then closed it, her bravado crumbling. That's not what it looks like, she stammered, but Ellie waved her off. Save it, she said, swiping again. An email popped up. Vic to Sophia, time-stamped 2 months back. Can't wait to see you in that necklace, babe. It's all yours. Ellie glanced at the diamonds dangling from Sophia's neck. Guess you weren't kidding, she said, her tone dry as dust. Vic's face was gray now, his hands gripping the tablecloth like it might save him. Ellie, listen, this is a misunderstanding. She cut him off, her voice rising just enough to carry. No, Vic, a misunderstanding is forgetting to pick up milk. This? She tapped the iPad again, pulling up their prenup. Scanned and highlighted, this is a deal breaker. See this little clause here? Infidelity. Says I get 50% of everything, assets, company shares, plus an extra 10% for every affair I can prove. And I've got proof of you and Sophia. She paused, letting it sink in, then swiped to another photo, Vic with a blonde at a bar, time-stamped 2 years ago. And her. And one more from 2021 I'll save for later. The room was dead silent now, every head turned their way. Mark and Tara stared wide-eyed from their table. The investors whispered furiously. Claire Voss's pen scratched like a machine gun. Vic's mouth worked soundlessly, but Ellie wasn't done. She pulled up a document. Harper Designs ownership records. Oh, and this, she said, zooming in on a highlighted line. You transferred 20% of my company. My company. To Sophia 2 weeks ago. No approval, no notice. Funny thing is, I checked with the board this morning. They reversed it. Turns out forging my signature doesn't hold up too well. Sophia's jaw dropped, her hand clutching the necklace like it might choke her. I didn't ask for that, she blurted, but Ellie just laughed, a low, bitter sound. Sure you didn't, she said, then turned back to Vic. But here's the real twist, honey. You didn't just screw me over with her. You screwed yourself. She swept one last time, and a bank statement filled the screen. Harper Designs accounts, with a $2 million withdrawal flagged. This is from last month. You funneled company money into your film. Off the books, no board approval. That's fraud, Vic. The SEC's already got a tip, and my lawyers got the originals. Vic's eyes bulged, his voice a rasp. Ellie, you can't. You wouldn't. She leaned forward, her gaze cold and unyielding. I already did. You thought I'd sit back and let you erase me from my marriage, my company, my life? She pushed the iPad toward him, the evidence glaring up at him like a death sentence. You built your little fantasy on my work, my money, my trust, and tonight it's over. The room erupted, gasps, murmurs, a chair scraping as someone stood for a better view. Vic slumped, his hands in his hair, while Sophia shoved her chair back, stumbling to her feet. This is insane. I'm out of here, she snapped, but Ellie's voice stopped her cold. Sit down, Sophia, she said, sharp and commanding. You're in this up to your neck. That necklace, paid for with my company's money. Enjoy explaining that to the cops. Sophia sank back down, tears smearing her mascara, the necklace now looking more like a noose. Vic tried one last time, his voice a desperate whisper. Ellie, please. We can fix this, privately, just us. She shook her head, standing up, her clutch in hand. Privately's done, Vic. You wanted an audience for your big show with her. I just gave you a better one." She turned to the room, her voice clear and steady. "Anyone curious about Harper Design's finances or Vic's creative accounting, stick around. I've got copies of everything, and I'm happy to share with the right people." The investors flinched. Mark and Tara nodded grimly, and Claire Voss was already dialing someone, her eyes gleaming with the scoop of the year. Ellie picked up the iPad, tucking it back into her clutch, and looked down at Vic one last time. "Happy anniversary," she said, her tone ice cold, then turned on her heel. As she walked toward the exit, the room parted for her, waiters stepping aside, diners staring in awe. Sophia's sobs echoed behind her, Vic's pleas fading into a pathetic mumble. Ellie didn't look back. Her heels clicked against the polished floor, each step a declaration. She'd spent months planning this, gathering every scrap of proof, turning her pain into power, and now, with the truth laid bare, she felt something shift, like a weight lifting she hadn't known she was carrying. Outside, the LA night hit her with a rush of cool air, the city lights sprawling out like a promise. Her driver, Luis, was waiting by the curb, the car door already open. "Everything good, Mrs. Marshall?" he asked, his brow creased with worry. She slid into the back seat, her lips curving into a real smile for the first time all night. "Better than good," she said, pulling the door shut. "And it's just Miss Harper now." The car pulled away, leaving La Belle Étoile and Vic behind. Her phone buzzed in her clutch, but she ignored it, leaning back against the seat. She'd just torched her old life to the ground, and damn, it felt good. The necklace, the affair, the stolen shares, they were nothing compared to what she'd taken back. Herself. Ellie leaned her head against the car window as Luis drove through the LA streets, the city lights streaking past in a blur of golden neon. The adrenaline from the showdown at La Belle Étoile still hummed in her veins, but it was settling now, giving way to something lighter. Relief, maybe, or the first taste of freedom she'd felt in years. Her clutch sat on the seat beside her, the iPad inside still warm from its starring role in Vic's public unraveling. She didn't need to check her phone to know it was blowing up. Friends, clients, probably Claire Voss begging for an exclusive. But tonight, she wasn't answering to anyone. Louise dropped her off at the Waldorf Astoria, where she'd booked a suite 2 nights ago. No penthouse with Vic tonight, no gilded cage filled with his lies. She'd packed a small bag and left it with the concierge earlier, knowing she wouldn't go back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The lobby was all marble and quiet luxury, and as she checked in, the clerk gave her a knowing smile. "Rough night?" he asked, sliding her keycard across the counter. "Not anymore," she said, and he chuckled like he'd seen this story before. Up in her room, Ellie kicked off her heels and poured herself a glass of wine from the minibar. She stepped onto the balcony, the LA skyline sprawling out beneath her, Hollywood Hills in the distance, the hum of the city like a heartbeat. She tugged her wedding ring off her finger, rolling it between her thumb and forefinger. 15 years, and it came down to this, a cheap prop in a marriage that had stopped being real a long time ago. She set it on the railing, not quite ready to toss it over, but close. By morning, the fallout hit like a tidal wave. Claire Voss's piece dropped online at 6 a.m., Hollywood producer caught in affair and fraud scandal at anniversary dinner, and it spread like wildfire. Screenshots of Ellie's iPad evidence were everywhere, blurry but damning, thanks to some quick phone pics from the restaurant crowd. Vic's team was scrambling, his assistant flooding inboxes with no comment statements, but the damage was done. Harper Design's board called an emergency meeting at 9 and Ellie joined via video, her hair still damp from the shower, her voice steady as she laid out the facts. Vic was suspended pending investigation, and by noon she was named interim CEO. Sophia vanished from the scene. Paparazzi caught her leaving her apartment with a hoodie pulled low, the necklace nowhere in sight. Ellie didn't care where she went. The girl was a pawn who'd played herself. The real win came later that day, when Ellie sat in her new office at Harper Designs. Well, Ellie Harper Studio now. She'd signed off on the rebranding that morning. A fresh logo with a rising crescent moon, a nod to her mom who'd lent her the startup cash all those years ago. The name felt right, like shedding a skin she'd outgrown. Her phone rang as she unpacked a box of sketches. Old designs she'd drawn when the company was just a dream. It was Tara, her voice crackling with excitement. "Ellie, you're a legend out here. People can't stop talking about last night." Ellie laughed, setting a frame on her desk, a photo of her and her mom, smiling in the sun. "Good. Let them talk." Then Tara dropped the kicker. "Oh, and some exec from Paramount just called me looking for you. Said they want you to design the sets for their next big flick. You in?" Ellie paused, her breath catching. A film gig? After everything Vic had put her through, here was Hollywood knocking on her door, not his. She grinned, leaning back in her chair. "Tell them I'll call back tomorrow," she said. "I've got a company to run first." She hung up, staring out at the city through her office window. The empty spot on her ring finger felt strange but right, like a blank canvas waiting for her next move. Vic was history, Sophia was irrelevant, and Ellie Harper was just getting started. The cage was open and she was already flying.